Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mang, and today we're doing an old school role manging video. Old school, where I sit here and I just pretty much read a RPG book to you, and I sort of just gush about how cool it is. And the game that I'm going to be talking about today, as you probably saw in the title, is Shadow of the Demon Lord. So this is written by Robert J. Schwalb. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but and he used to work on I guess some D&D stuff, things like that. He used to work for Green Ronin, according to this. I guess like he's been in the industry for a little while, and then he sort of branched off on his own to make Shadow of the Demon Lord. Now, interestingly, this was actually a kickstarted product back in 2015. I had no knowledge of it. I don't follow RPG Kickstarters. And so this game came out officially about 2 years ago. And since then, there have been just a metric ass ton of supplemental products released for it. There have already been two companion books, Demon Lord Companions. There have been like six different supplement books about like different regions of the setting and different like themes, and they all add like new monsters and new spells and new like paths and just all sorts of stuff has come out. It's crazy how much has come out for this game, and I didn't know about it for a little while. I heard about it, I don't know, I want to say like maybe a year ago. And I think I just sort of ignored it. I don't know what I was doing a year ago, but I guess I ignored it. And then 6 months ago, something like that, I looked into it and actually started reading about it. And I guess something about it didn't grab me. The cover grabbed me. I like this. The concept, I guess, was cool. The setting, the sort of grim dark fantasy, that grabbed me. But I started reading, and it was just like, I don't know. I already have Warhammer, because I already had Warhammer at the time, and I was like, I don't even ever get to play Warhammer. You know, what are the odds I'm ever going to get to play this? And I don't want to DM something, you know, it's just whatever. So I passed it by until this week when I was reading some discussion, and somebody mentioned this, and I was like, yeah, I should look into that again. And so I actually started reading it in earnest, a PDF, and then I was like, my God. And so then I had to order the book immediately. And here it is. And so, yeah, sit back and relax, because you're going to get to listen to a very excited Mang for the next hour or so, maybe hour and a half, who knows, about some RPG nerdiness. Very nerdy shit. Okay, so Shadow of the Demon Lord is sort of a Frankensteinian monster, you might say. It's sort of taking all these other things and stitching them together into a new product. And, you know, you can see all the stitches. You can see all the inspirations for this game in the game. You can see all the stitching. But just because something is a Frankenstein monster doesn't mean he can't be your best fucking friend. All right. So even though this steals or borrows or whatever is inspired by a lot of different things, it all comes together in just a really incredible way. I've yet to play this. I'm hoping to play this very soon, run something in it. But just from reading it, I like so much of what I read. So I would say the two major games that have inspired this, even just like reading his own preface, and what he's worked on. The two major things that inspired this are Dungeons and Dragons, specifically Fifth Edition, and Warhammer Fantasy Role Playing. And I'm not going to really go into what he took from both games and other games and things like that, because it doesn't really matter. You're not here to hear about those other games. You're here to hear about this game. But if you've been following role manging and my ramblings and things like that for some time, you're probably aware I'm not a huge fan of Dungeons and Dragons anymore. I used to be a big fan of 4th edition. That's how I got into role playing, and I was a big defender of it. People would shit talk it, and I would defend it, saying it's no, you can role play with 4th edition. Just because it's got a lot of miniatures and board gamey feel, you can do some serious good role playing with it, and blah blah blah. But even I could see the flaws in 4th edition. I could see the cracks, and so when they announced 5th edition or D&D Next or whatever, I was intrigued because they said this is the D&D game for everybody. It's going to have something for everybody. They were trying to basically stitch together a D&D monstrosity, and you could like swap in and out modules depending on how complicated you wanted the game, how in depth you wanted, if you wanted simple role playing or deep role playing, and blah 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 blah. I was intrigued, but when 5th edition finally came out, it was still Dungeons and Dragons. They really didn't change the core concept, nor I guess should they. But I started to realize this is not really the game for me. The D20 system was just too swingy. It was just too beset by luck, and for me at least, I mean, just off the core rulebook, there was just not enough. There was complexity in the wrong areas and not enough complexity in the areas that I wanted, and you still had these sort of old school mechanics of, monster, really a sort of a combat based game with XP for monsters. So you were inclined to just fight monsters to get XP, and I felt like the world had kind of moved on from this, but it's Dungeons and Dragons, this is what you get. And so I moved on from that, and I moved on towards Dungeon World. And I mean, I love Dungeon World. I think it's a fantastic system. It's easily one of my favorites. But what Dungeon World doesn't do that great, or at least what I don't think it does that great, is sort of a grim fantasy or dark fantasy. And so that's what moved me to get into Warhammer Fantasy, because this is the OG sort of dark, grim fantasy system. And I liked a lot of what I saw in here. I really liked the setting. I liked how dark and grim it was, and the horror aspect, the sort of the insanity type systems and things like that, the chaos mutation. I liked all that. I liked I like starting out as like really piece of shit characters. I like starting out as like a rat catcher or a baker, or just like some common guy that aspires for more, and he's got to really fight tooth and nail, but he can eventually become like a troll slayer or a knight or actually a wizard, things like that. And so you're actually raising up the ranks without it just being all these sort of numerical things. And it's just, D&D, you sort of start out as a hero and you end up as just a god, whereas here you start out as a commoner and you end up as a hero. And I just sort of like that altogether. But Warhammer, at least the 2nd edition, also has issues. For me, the magic system, while interesting, is just very hard to get into, at least from a character standpoint. And that's by design. Magic is not meant to be everywhere in the setting. And so it's not easy for someone to become a wizard. That's really tricky. And so the magic is slightly more ritualized. You're not just going to be running around all the time just throwing fireballs and all sorts of crazy shit like that. There is some cool magic in there, and that's what I really liked. But it wasn't accessible enough for any given character. Um, the combat rules were complicated. They were crunchier than they really needed to be. Blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about all this so basically I can explain that everything I just complained about is sort of fixed in this game. Um, let's talk about. I should probably talk about the system first before I talk about the setting, but it's going to get blended together. Okay, let's talk about the system. So it's a D20 system, the dreadful D20. Whereas nowadays a lot of games are using bell curves and things like that, and he actually put out some optional rules that let you switch the thing from a D20 to a 3D6 system. But since the entire game is designed around D20, changing it like that changes the whole game. And so you can try it, but I don't have much interest, even though I probably prefer a bell curve system. But switching from D20 to a bell curve without changing anything else, because with a bell curve, you tend to fall right into the top of the bell, and with a D20 you have equal chance for anything, and so the system is designed around that. And so there are some alleviations to make the D20 system palatable. For one, for like 90% of challenge rolls, which is a roll that your character does, like a skill check or something like that, to pick a lock or to kick down a door or to listen into a eavesdrop on something, or to find a hidden clue, or to track footprints, or whatever, all these sort of skill checks that you'd find in other games. 90% of them in this game have a challenge number of 10. Pretty much no matter what. So that means the number that you need to reach is 10 on a D20, which means I think that's like you have a better than 50%. That's like 55% chance. I think, because if it was 11 or higher, that would be 50-50. Yeah, so it's a 55% chance to succeed baseline without anything else influencing it. So already that's pretty good odds. Because that's not really going to change for any given activity. Now, you might say, well, okay, how do you differentiate between like a shitty lock that you're lockpicking or like a master lock? Well, you do that through banes and boons. So 5th edition D&D had introduced a system called advantage and disadvantage. And basically it was, if there was some sort of positive influence on the situation, whether it was you had like masterwork tools, or the guy that you're attacking is dazed, or he's distracted, or you're ambushing, or all sorts of different things that might influence a situation to give you an advantage. That meant when you rolled the D20, you rolled it twice and you took the higher result. And people did math to discover like how numerically what that really means for your roll, but it was a nice thing to have. You wanted advantage. Then disadvantage is the opposite. If there was something negative affecting the situation for you, for your roll, you rolled 2 dice and you took the lower result. And that was obviously pretty bad. You didn't want that. You were much less likely to succeed. Banes and boons operate in a similar fashion. If there's something positive affecting your situation, you get a boon. If there's something negative, you get a bane. But those can stack. Whereas in 5th edition, it was Spoonie did like an hour-long rant about this or something, and he was right. It's a very binary situation. You either have advantage or you don't. Or you either have disadvantage or you don't. It doesn't matter if all the stars aligned and it was just a perfect situation for you. You still just had the one advantage. It's not like you rolled d20 5 times and you took the highest one. It was just once. It was one advantage, one disadvantage. With Banes and Boons, they can stack. So if you have multiple things that are affecting the situation for you in a positive way, you might have 3 Boons. Or negatively, you might have 3 Banes or whatever. And they cancel each other out. So if you have 2 Boons and 1 Bane, you end up rolling with 1 Boon. Now, that doesn't mean it's not like advantage and disadvantage, because you're not rolling the d20 multiple times. You're rolling the d20, and then for however many Banes you have or however many Boons you have, you roll a number of d6 along with your d20. And then of those, if it's a Boon, you take the highest numbered d6. If it's a Bane, you take the highest... Well, either way, you take the highest numbered d6. But you either add it to your d20 or subtract it from your d20. So basically, as long as you have 1 Boon, you have the chance of adding up to 6 to your d20 roll. And so more Boons just give you a better chance of adding a 5 or a 6 to your roll. And if you have more Banes, you can subtract, potentially up to 6 from your roll. So even if you're just, the shit is stacked against you, like you're picking a lock with 5 Banes, all right? You can still succeed. If you roll like an 18 and you get -6 on the roll from Banes, you still got 12 or something, and as long as you get 10 or higher, you succeed. Conversely, if you roll with a bunch of Boons, you can roll like a 4, and as long as you get a +6, you can still succeed. So it's meant to sort of mitigate the randomness of dice rolls, of the d20. And this is a good system for a few reasons. One is, it's very easy for the DM to just hand out Banes and Boons, depending on the situation. He doesn't have to think about it too hard. He doesn't have to think of a numerical modifier, like, oh, is this fog, is this -4 or is this -6 to his rolls? Okay, he's got the sun in his enemy's eyes. Is that a +1 or a +3? No, it's just, here's a Boon, here's a Bane, here's 2 Boons, here's 3 Banes, whatever. It's just very quick, very easy. And it moves things along. And so many things in this book where it would just be like, in older games, it would be like, yeah, that's a -3 if they're using this without the strength requirement, or if you use this spell, it gives your friends a +2 on their next roll or whatever. No, it's just, here's some Banes if you do this, if here's a Boon if you do this, blah, blah, blah. It's throughout the whole book, and it's really just a simple, elegant system. It's also good because it encourages players to sort of stack the odds for themselves. In 5th edition, it's like, all right, all I have to do is get an advantage, and then I have advantage. Whereas in here, it's like, no, you want the fucking stars to align. You want this to be as favorable as a situation as you possibly can. And so it encourages, I believe, creativity. Which is good in a grim sort of setting, because players are meant to be more cautious. They're meant to be more creative and ingenious, whatever. I always fuck that up. They're meant to be a little bit more thinky. And so the Bane and Boon system sort of helps allow that, I think. So anyways, the other thing that sort of plays with the D20 system is modifiers. So in Dungeons and Dragons, if you have a 10 strength, you have a +0 modifier. If you have a 20 strength, you have a +5 modifier. Because I think the formula is like half +5 or something like that. Or -5, I think it's half -5. If you have a 14 strength, that means you have a +2 modifier. Okay? And so Shadow the Demon Lord says screw all that, and they just have a -10, and that's your modifier. So if you have a 10 strength, your modifier is 0, right? But if you have an 11 strength, your modifier is +1. 12 strength, +2. 13 strength, +3. 9 strength, -1. So on and so forth. It's like just a 1-for-1 kind of thing. And so that is sort of like a stat squish, I guess. 5th edition, I think, kind of went with that a little bit, but they didn't go as far. And so that means that, you know, the average human has 10 strength. If you have 14 strength, that's like, holy shit. You know, you are much stronger than the average human. Yeah, like, here, the normal weightlifting for 10 strength is 100 pounds. The normal weightlifting for 14 strength is 350 pounds. And then 15 strength, 500 pounds. 16 strength, 1,000 pounds. So it really ramps up there. And so this keeps all the numbers very sort of confined. Defense, which is largely based off of your agility and can be modified by some armor. There are not many monsters in the core rulebook that have a defense higher than 20. I think there might be like 1. Not even. I had to go to some of the supplements to find like a 23 defense, and that's like, holy shit. So most of the monsters that you'll be fighting have 15 defense, let's see here, 14 defense, 10 defense. There's an 18 defense. Here, a huge demon. Huge demon. This is one of the toughest things you could possibly fight in the core rulebook. That has a 20 defense. Okay? Most of the monsters early on are going to have like 12 to maybe 15 defense. And defense is the number that it's like AC. It's the number you need to roll to hit. And so I always really disliked that in 4th edition. That was one of my least favorite things, because it was like, there was the challenge in encounters. It was just pretty much like, okay, to hit this thing I have to roll an 18 or higher on a d20, and that's just freaking lame. Whereas here, you know, you can put in some crazy ass monster, and yeah, it has the power to just stomp your shit in, but that doesn't mean you can't hit it. I mean, you probably can't kill it, but at least you can freaking hit it. Maybe it's just a personal thing, but I liked the idea of just low defense, high damage. So that's good. All right, how far are we in already? 23 minutes? Oh yeah, it's gonna be a while. It's gonna be a while. All right, let's move along. Okay, so there are 4 attributes. There are 4 attributes in the game. They are strength, agility, intellect, and will. That's it. Very simple. They cut out pretty much charisma and constitution. They sort of roll constitution just into strength, which is fine. And then charisma is sort of split between intellect and will. You use intellect if you're trying to like bluff somebody, and will if you're trying to persuade or intimidate somebody. So it's sort of split between those. But just 4 attributes, that's it. And you don't have to worry about those numbers getting to like in the 30s or something like that. And so they have 4 attributes, and then in addition they have health, which is your health, and that's sort of mainly derived from strength. Defense, which is like your armor class, that's how hard you are to hit. That's mainly derived from your agility. Perception, which is, you know, how well you can notice things and stuff like that. And that's mainly derived off of intellect. And then you have an insanity score, which is, well, you have your will, and you can get a number of insanity up to your will number before you go mad. And then they also have corruption, which isn't based on any of the attributes. But it's very simple. They cut off all this sort of bullshit of of attributes and stuff like that. And they also cut off all skills. There's no skills in the game. So you don't have to worry about this laundry list of, oh, I have +1 to this, I have +4 to this, I have +6 to this, I have +3 to this, blah, 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 blah. Cut out all skills. Which is, again, sort of starting to become a modern thing of just, no, you don't need that. And so, you know, any of the skills, really the only challenge rolls that you're making for skill checks are based off of either your 4 attributes or your perception. Your perception number could be different than your intellect. And really the only skill type things come from your profession. Because everybody starts with some profession, one or more than one, and that can influence like what you're good at, but it also can determine like what you're capable of doing. Let me find the I mean, the professions are pretty much what you'd expect. And there's a lot of them. But they really don't, like... They don't dictate what you can do. It's sort of just... If something comes up and you feel that your profession, your background, whatever, would be of an assistance in whatever you're trying to do, then you might get you get a boon out of it. Or you might be able to attempt it where normally you could not. And so you can come up with any profession, but they have all sorts of stuff. A butcher, a miner, a fisherman, a constable, a cultist, a grave robber, a prostitute. You could have been an academic of some type, a professor. You could have been a bandit. And so say you have your profession before you became an adventurer was that you were a bandit. You robbed people on the highway or whatever. There are a lot of instances where you could argue, it's like, okay, I've lived in the wilderness, I lived with a group of bandits, maybe, you know, I know how bandits operate. There are times where you could easily argue for a boon or multiple boons when you're trying to do a skill check related to something with banditry or something with cooking or something with being a priest or something with being a law professor, blah, blah, blah. So it's a very free-form system, which is usually the better way to go. What the hell was I talking about? Anyways. So when you make your character, you pick a... They don't call it a race, even though it's a race. They call it an ancestry. And in the core rulebook, there are 6 of them. There is human, changeling, clockwork, dwarf, goblin, and orc. You'll notice there was no elf listed. And that's because this game, the setting is like old school, like Grimm's fairy tale kind of fantasy. So elves are like, they're like living in their hidden world away from human eyes, and they occasionally like slip over to steal human children and stuff, or pluck out their eyeballs, and like elves are pretty just nasty shit, and so they're not a core race, they're not a core ancestry in this book. They did release a supplement where you can play as an elf or a hobgoblin or something like that that normally lives in the Hidden Kingdom. But I think you probably, if you're going that way, you probably want everybody to be a fairy, basically one of those, the Hidden Kingdom elves or hobgoblins or pixies. Because really they tend to be just kind of fucked up. And like in the setting, you're not going to see elves just walking around. And so you really have to operate on a sort of different campaign, I think. But it's also, you know, if you don't want to follow the setting as written here, and you want to just use the system for your whatever, they put the elves in there, so you can just have, yeah, I want to use the elf, you know, the stats and whatever, but I want to run my own setting where elves are everywhere, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, so yeah, you pick your ancestry, and this really determines your starting attributes, your size, your speed, the languages you speak, and then you roll on a bunch of tables if you want, to determine like your background and your appearance and blah, blah, blah. So a human starts off with 10 in all 4 of their attributes, and then they can choose 1 attribute to increase by 1. Like I said, it's not like D&D. You're not rolling for your stats. It's pre-assigned, and if you get a +1 boost, that's That's a big thing. It's like getting a +2 boost in D&D. You're getting a full modifier bump. So you're not starting with 18 strength in this game. That would be insane. Um, you can also reduce one attribute by 1 to increase another one by 1. So a -1 +1. So as a human, if you wanted a really high strength, you could choose your strength to increase by 1, and then you could reduce your intellect by 1 to increase your strength again to 12. And that would be it. You'd have a 12, 10, 9, 10. That would be your setup, which is, it's very sort of baseline, even sort of thing. Your starting perception is equal to your intellect. Your starting defense is equal to your agility. And your starting health is equal to your strength. That's very baseline. And again, other ancestries, other races, they can modify those numbers. As you'll see when we get to dwarf, their starting health is equal to their strength +4. So they just have a base HP boost. Your size for a human can be 1/2 or 1, which I thought was very cool. If you want to be a half person, a midget. And in fact, when you're rolling on the table, you can actually play a kid. They allow you to play a kid, which is great. So if you want to play a 9-year-old kid, his size would be 1/2. It would not be 1. And your speed is 10, and then you speak the common tongue, and you can speak another additional language or add a random profession. So you can start with 2 professions that you've been in the past, which is potentially beneficial. Also, when you reach level 4, you get a new benefit based on your race, on your ancestry. And then you roll for these tables. Again, I could just read all these tables to you because there's some really interesting character gen stuff here. I'm personally now of the mindset I just love random character generation. I just think it's great. I think it's how you should make your characters. Because when you make your character randomly, anything is possible. You don't even realize, you don't even know what you could be playing, 5 sessions down the road. You have no idea. When I go into a campaign and I play as Ovum or I play as Artemis, I know what I'm doing. I know how this is going to go down. It's pretty much always the same thing, and it just sort of depends on the campaign itself and my feelings on the day or whatever, or the system or the setting or whatever. But basically, they have their personality. That's how it is every time. When you're making a random character, that's how you discover your favorite character. That's how you discover your new favorite shit. Because you don't even know. You can't realize it. Not saying that I don't love playing as Ovum or love playing as Artemis, but I just think there's something magical about playing something completely fresh that you wouldn't even think of normally. And so there's some great tables in here for every ancestry. That could really just kickstart your brain and get it moving. So there's D20 charts for your background, and these can actually affect you mechanically. Some of these charts, you can start with insanity, or you start with corruption, or you're missing a finger, or you have children, or you speak an additional language. You start with more money. So it's kind of, you're encouraged to roll on these tables. Because you can get stuff out of them. You can choose your religion here by rolling 3d6, your personality, your age, your build, your appearance, and like I said, once we get sort of to discussing the paths and sort of the class system, you're going to see how sort of open-ended it is, and really the options are limitless. It's really awesome. Changeling. So instead of elves, they have changelings. And changeling is one of my personal favorite races because that's what Frederick Zoller is. And so changeling is a thing from actual folklore. But they modified it. They changed it to our common fantasy thought of a changeling, which is somebody that, like a shapeshifter. They can take on somebody else's appearance, like Mystique. But the folklore version of the changeling is when the hidden elves came into our world at night to steal our children, they would leave behind an elven baby or something. They would leave behind like basically a pile of shit. They would leave behind like rocks and sticks and mud and stuff that they sort of shaped into a baby like form. And then I don't remember the actual folklore. I might be mixing it up with here. It's something similar with that. I can't remember if it's the actual folklore or the folklore of the game. I gotta check because it's. I want to be clear here. Ba, 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 ba. Hmm. Damn it, I don't remember where I read that now. But basically, like, it would be, yeah. I guess the folklore was that it was an actual, like, fairy child that they would leave there in place of the baby. I guess they valued the human baby more than their own elven babies, fairy babies. And so, I guess in folklore, they would, at some point, if they suspected that a baby was actually a changeling, they would throw it in the fire, and if it was a changeling, the fire would turn green. And it would, like, turn to its natural form and fly away, or something like that. But if it was a real baby, it just dies. I guess that's correct. Anyway, so here, here I guess it's just a pile of sticks and stuff, and they would use magic to like sort of make it look like a baby, and then after a while it would wear off. But sometimes the magic didn't wear off, and it actually grew up to be a changeling, like a shapeshifter. I don't know how all this works, but that's how it is in the setting. So yeah, basically it's a shapeshifter. And so they start with one less strength. But they are immune to disease, and they have shadow sight, so they can see into shadows as if they were lit, and they can steal someone's identity. So they have to be looking at the person. They have to use it within short range of somebody that they can see, a living creature of size 1 or 1/2. And then they change their physical features to look like it, but their clothing and possessions remain unchanged. It'll last until you use the talent again, or you become incapacitated, or touch an object made from iron. So that's another big thing in here, is all these sort of fairy creatures all have a vulnerability to iron. Even like some of the really powerful creatures, if they're fairies, they have a vulnerability to iron. Then, the changeling charts go through your true age and your background, like what happened to you as a child. If you have a quirk, like you can't get drunk, or you always speak the truth, or you have glowing green eyes, blah, 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 your personality. Then we have clockwork. So basically a robot, mechanical people made from metal, plating, gears, wires, bits of spring, and cogs. And basically, like, some sort of wizard or warlock or whatever took a soul from the underworld, like, plucked it out and shoved it into this machine. So you are basically, if you play a clockwork, you are playing a dead person. You are somebody who died in the past, but you lost all your memories. And so now you're living again, but now you're this metal machine person. And all clockworks have a key somewhere on their body that they cannot reach themselves. When the key is cranked and turning, you count as a creature. So you can move, you can act, you can think, blah, blah, blah. When it stops, you become an object. Your ki stops turning when you become incapacitated. It also stops turning at the end of any round in which you got a total of 0 or lower on an attack roll or challenge roll. So that's basically a critical fail in this game. It's not if you roll 1, but if you get 0 or less because of a bane or something like that. So usually something really bad happens. And in this case, you shut off. You just stop. You freeze up. And you cannot turn yourself back on. You cannot. At least as far as I can see, there's no way you can turn yourself back on because you are shut. You are an object, and you cannot reach your ki. So someone else has to turn your ki back on and wind you back up so that you can start moving again. It's pretty much. I don't even remember the guy's name, but it's the metal guy from Return to Oz. That's exactly what it is. It's hilarious. But to offset that, you do not need to eat, drink, or breathe. You do not age. You cannot be transformed into an undead creature. But you also cannot swim because you sink to the bottom. When you're an object, you can actually be repaired. So instead of healing, you can be repaired. But it's actually worse. Because when you're a creature, you can just heal yourself by sleeping. When you're an object, you have to be repaired, which might fail because there's a challenge roll. Also, your stats are worse. You have Strength 9, Agility 8, Intellect 9, and Will 9. So that's worse. But your defense is a static 13 at starting level, which is pretty good. You'd be hard-pressed to match that at starting level. And you're immune from disease and poison, fatigue, and being put asleep. But somebody could just crank your keys, so I guess. It's really funny. And they have all sorts... Actually, Clockwork is a really interesting character. It's a bold choice, because if you roll on this Clockwork form, like the form that you are... like the type of machine you are, what you look like and stuff, it can vary wildly. It's a 3d6 roll. If you roll a 3, it says you're a small winged clockwork. Reduce your health by 5 and your size to 1/2. You can fly, but you must land at the end of your movement or fall. You are 3 feet tall and weigh 50 pounds. That's crazy. If you roll 4 or 5, you're a small spider-like clockwork with functional hands. Reduce your size to 1/2. You ignore the effects of difficult terrain when you climb. You are 3 feet tall and weigh 50 pounds. If you roll pretty much 6 through 15, which is most likely, you pretty much end up normal. Either half size or size 1. 16 to 17, you're a large humanoid clockwork. Increase your size to 2, but reduce your speed and your defense by 2. You're 10 feet tall and weigh 750 pounds. If you're on 18, you're a large clockwork with the lower body of a horse. Increase your size to 2 and your speed by 2. Reduce your defense by 3. You're 6 feet long, 6 feet tall, and weigh 750 pounds. Crazy. I mean, that would be a crazy-ass character. And you can also roll for your purpose. So you're built for war, or you're built to use magic. And this is how you increase your stats. So it's really recommended you roll on these things. Because if you're built for war, you increase your strength or agility by 2. If you were built to use magic, you increase your intellect or will by 2. And so it's really good to roll on this stuff. If you roll for background, you roll a 7 or a 19, you have a sword grafted to one of your arms. It's pretty badass. Clockwork is pretty cool. What I plan on doing when I play is I'm just going to roll a d6 to decide my ancestry. I'm not even going to pick. I'm just going to do all freaking random. Dwarf, of course. Dwarves are pretty common. They, for the most part, they're pretty traditional fantasy dwarves. They have strength 10, agility 9, intellect 10, will 10. Their health is equal to their strength plus 4. They have dark sight, so they can see in darkness. Half damage from poison. Again, you can sort of roll for... They also get a hated creature, so you can roll for what creature you really fucking hate. Whether it's ogres, beastmen, orcs, goblins, Or if you roll really high, you might hate dragons or demons, in which case, well, good luck. Basically, your hatred gives you 1 boon on attack rolls against that kind of creature. Again, see what I'm saying? It's just really easy. It's just, you don't even have to think about a number or something like, what is it? Is it a +2 when I fight a demon? Or is it plus... No, it's just, oh, it's a boon. Done. It's just, at least on paper, it seems great. Goblins, yeah, you can play as a goblin in the core rulebook. Pretty interesting. They're sort of common. Strength 8, agility 12. That's pretty good. Intellect 10, will 9. Immune to disease and being charmed. But they have the iron vulnerability because they are technically a fairy creature. They have shadow sight and they are sneaky. So whenever they roll to become hidden or move silently, you roll agility with 1 boon. See what I'm saying? Just boom. And they have all sorts of very interesting tables here you can roll on. This odd habit table. I could just fucking read this thing to you. Here, if you roll a 1 on the d20 for an odd habit, you save all your secretions in small bottles and give them as gifts to people you like. And it's not like, if you play D&D, or you play almost any RPG, it's not like you can't do this. I'm not saying like this is some groundbreaking system here. It's just having random tables almost encouraged in character generation means you're going to end up with some really interesting characters out the gate, and the game wants you to. And I like that. And it just has all these interesting ideas in here. You tell filthy jokes at inappropriate times. Like, that's a pretty fucking memorable character right there, regardless of anything else you're rolling or doing. Orcs. Yes, orc is a core character, which is very exciting to me. Although, Ovum is a half orc, but, still pretty good. Orcs are cool. Well, here's the thing about the game. It's grim dark, it's dark fantasy. And so what that means is usually you're not specifically assumed to be playing good characters. And this game goes even a little bit further, where it's really like, it's fully ready for you to play absolute pieces of shit. Just bloodthirsty maniacs. And that's because the default setting, and sort of the default setting for the campaigns you might run here, is that the end of the world is coming real freaking soon. We'll get to talking about the shadow of the Demon Lord soon enough. But bad shit is going down, and things, basically the universe is going to be gobbled up. And so you might be the type of character that wants to encourage that and serve under the Demon Lord. But usually if a player is playing a piece of shit, he's looking out for number 1. And number 1 usually does not want the world to end unless he's ending it. So, it's... Not that, like a virtuous paladin of the new faith or something like that is going to be working alongside, a bloodthirsty, ripping, tearing orc or something through the whole campaign. But I think what they probably are, most of the time it's going to be, you're in the middle. Your whole group is somewhere in the middle there. You're not Mr. Righteous, but you're also not Mr. Eating Babies. Most of the time. And you can't plan for everybody's character, but compared to D&D, it's prepared for you to be playing some pieces of shit. And that can include an orc. So orcs start with 11 strength, 10 agility, 9 intellect, 9 will, so they're built a little bit more towards strength. But this is not limiting like your potential options in the future at all. They have shadow sight, and then you can roll on all these tables. You can play an orc child. You can play a child 8 years old or younger. So a 6-year-old orc. But if you're rolling the orc build, so you roll how like tall and strong and big you are. If you're rolling 18 on that, you're a giant among orcs. So you can play a 6-year-old giant among orcs. That's an interesting character. You can roll your appearance, so you might have like pus and festering oozes, or you might be a really attractive orc. Your background, all sorts of stuff. You fell in love with a human and were spurned for your affections. You received an education. You know how to read the common tongue. You saved an important noble from an assassination attempt. See, and that's supposed to just get the gears turning for your character. Professions, I already kind of went over, all sorts of stuff like that. You roll randomly for your wealth. So you might be a rich orc or a poor dwarf, or you might be living on the streets or in the woods. And this sort of determines your starting equipment, whether you start with like a club and some pennies, or you might start with noble's clothing, a healing potion, and a bunch of money. You know, life's not fair, so who knows what you'll get. Then each character gets one interesting thing. So this is sort of like an oddity, I guess, from Numenera. It's not necessarily magical, but it's just sort of unique. It's unique to each character. And there are 6 tables here for all the interesting things. This entire set of pages is all just shit. Shit. A pair of dancing shoes, a gleaming dragon scale, a pair of spectacles that sometimes let you see through up to 1 inch of solid rock, a bag of 100 marbles, and sometimes you could find uses for these things, and sometimes they're just, you know, to help you roleplay a little bit, build your character. Okay. So that's character gen, and hold on. Get a little rum in me so I can keep talking. There are 10 levels in the game. So you can make it up to level 10. And the game works off of basically just a group advancement. So it's up to the DM to decide when you advance. Usually it's like after you do like complete an adventure or something, and the DM will say, okay, you all level up. And it's usually assumed or suggested that you start at level 0. So, and this is something I've recently discovered I didn't really know existed, sort of, and I really like it, and that's the concept of a funnel. You start at level 0, and in this game, all you have is your ancestry. So all you have is your starting stats, your starting health, your starting equipment. You have no like special abilities really, unless it's related to your ancestry, and that's it. You're pretty much just a commoner or a noble, but you're not an adventurer really. And the funnel, which is the first adventure you do, is what makes you into somebody that's really going to go out there and become somebody more. Somebody that's going to risk their life again and again, you know, for whatever purpose, glory or honor or power, so on and so forth. And so that starting adventure is really interesting because you have nothing other than who you are, who your character is, and their background and their personality and their race and things like that to differentiate each other. It's not like that's the warrior, that's the mage, he's a thief. Nothing. And so you're meant to sort of decide what sort of character you're going to become during this starting an adventure. That's the idea. If you pick up a sword and you have a big sword and you rush in first, your character is probably more inclined to become a fighter, a warrior, a gladiator, a barbarian, or something like that, a berserker. Whereas if you find a bow or you use a bow or something like that, that sort of guides your character. If you're sneak, if your character ends up being like the scout that moves ahead stealthily and you know scouts out the situation, or decides to sort of test out the traps or whatever, you know, that sort of, you know, it's showing like you as the player are determining what your character is doing. And it's like, oh, I guess I do like to charge in first, or I guess this character would sneak around, or I guess this character would read these forbidden tomes that he found, or something like that. And it's like, you know, half of that, or, you know, that might just be what you as a player want to do what you tend to prefer is I tend to prefer to rush in, or I tend to prefer to sit back and read from the scroll or whatever. I tend to prefer to play fighters or wizards or something. But it's also meant to encourage the unique character to come forth. And it's like, would this character really rush forward? So it allows you to try out different play styles and different things without being like, oh well, I'm playing Ovum. He's gonna rush in. That's what he does. He's Ovum. It encourages, like, I've never played this character before. I have to figure out what type of character he is. So I really like the idea of a funnel. And so after you finish the funnel, you should at least survive. Hopefully, you might not. Funnels can be deadly. You might have some backup characters, but whoever survives should reach level 1. And so when you reach level 1, you get a novice path. And so throughout a campaign, as you level up, you're going to actually get 3 different paths. You get a novice path, an expert path, and a master path. You can, at your choice, instead of taking a master path, take a different expert path if you really want to, like, multi-class or something like that. But I know we're already at like 56 minutes. This is going to be a long video. The multitude of character builds and options available to any given character is just crazy. Because, this, like, just puts Warhammer to shame as far as, like, what your character can really become in as far as options. In Warhammer, you start as a random career. A starting career. And again, this could be an innkeeper, or a butcher, or a surgeon, or a barber, or whatever. A rat catcher. And you're meant to go through different careers. And so, but it's limited because, like, if you start out as a thug, you can only become, for the most part, a bodyguard, an interrogator, a mercenary, a pit fighter, or a racketeer. And so if you want to become a wizard lord and you start out as a thug, that's really tricky. You have to really work for that. And because each career has their own career exits that they can specifically move into and move around through. And it's meant to follow sort of a logical progression, and it does have that going for it. The idea of just this logic. But really the downside for me playing Warhammer is it just takes so friggin' long. Even when I was just handing out XP to my players like candy, it takes forever to move through a career and move on to another one. And that probably can be appealing to some. It's meant to be this grand epic journey, 50 sessions or something like that. But I'll tell you, most people do not play campaigns that long. It just doesn't happen. I think there were polls, I don't even remember, but like for 4th edition, I think it was, like, the poll was that the majority of campaigns do not go past like level 7 or level 8. Something like that. Like, most campaigns are not these epic lifetime, oh my god, I'll never forget this kind of campaign. A lot of them are just sort of meant to be, I would say, 8 to 10 sessions if you're sort of lucky. If it goes beyond that, you have like a real campaign, at least as far as I'm concerned. And so Shadow of the Demon Lord only has 10 levels. And after every adventure, you gain a level, usually. That's what it implies. You can slow that down if you want, but I probably wouldn't. Because, again, at least for me, the number of character builds means, okay, if I get to level 10 and my character is done, he's not going to progress anymore, I would be ready to just start fresh, start a completely different character and go through a whole different set. And, an adventure could be 1 session, or it could be 2 sessions, or maybe even 3 sessions, or something like that, depending on what you determine the adventure to be. And so, you can get 12, 15, maybe even some more sessions out of that to get to level 10. And that's a lot. That's plenty. That's a good campaign. I know some people are just nuts and they're like, I've been playing this campaign for 3 years. And it's like, I can't even fathom that. But that's impressive. Maybe Shadow of the Demon Lord wouldn't be the right type of game for those people, but for most people, I think it'll be pretty good. Okay, now that we're over an hour, let's talk about paths. So Novice Path, Expert Path, Master Path. When you hit level 1, you get to choose from one of the 4 Novice Paths. This is Magician, Priest, Rogue, Warrior. Very simple, very basic. He's a magician, he's a warrior, he's a rogue. So in a party, you could have, oh, we got 3 rogues and a priest or something, something like that. It's like Final Fantasy 1, I guess. And they are very... I mean, they're... Even at level 1, you can branch out pretty wildly, especially if you're a priest or a magician when you get magic. Between a couple rogues at level 1, they're going to be pretty similar. I mean, it sort of depends on what weapons they're using and how they operate, but between, a couple different warriors and rogues, there isn't that much there as far as differences. But magicians and priests get magic, and oh my, I could make a separate video about the fucking magic system. We're gonna hold off a minute on that. But when you make a level 1 magician, you get to make 4 choices, discovering 1 tradition or learning 1 spell for each. And so you get to learn. You can learn up to 4 different traditions. Which is like a school of magic. And as a magician, you actually get to learn both level 0 spells for any tradition you learn. So you can potentially know 8 spells at level 1, which is pretty exciting. And so, between 2 different magicians at level 1, they can each learn, different traditions and learn different spells for those different traditions and things like that. And what's more, when you realize that there are... Hold on. I think there's 30. There's 30 different traditions in the core rulebook. The supplements add like... God, 20 more maybe? Something like that. It's absolutely insane. And each tradition has, in the core rulebook, like 10 spells, 12 spells each, something like that. It can sort of vary, but quite a few each. And then, again, the supplements add a bunch of spells to different traditions and things like that. The magic... Oh my... I should make a different video about it. I think I probably will. This is going to be a 2-hour video otherwise. So yeah, just the difference between multiple different magicians and priests, because priests can learn, other traditions. They can learn traditions based on their religion, which is, magicians can also learn the sort of religious traditions. Nothing's stopping them. But, yeah, there can be a bunch of different variations. But if you want to play a warrior starting out, you get to increase 2 attributes by 1. You get a +5 health, which is good. You get to learn a new profession. You get the Catch Your Breath ability, which lets you use an action to heal yourself. And you get weapon training. So when attacking with a weapon, you make the attack roll with 1 boon. So that's just across the board for the rest of your character's life. He always, when he's attacking with a weapon, he automatically gets a boon from that. So, I mean, he's going to be good at hitting stuff, no doubt about it. When you get to level 2, you get another +5 health, and your attacks with weapons deal 1d6 extra damage for the rest of your character's life. And if your attack roll is ever 20 or higher and exceeds the target number by at least 5, it deals another d6 extra damage. And so on and so forth. And so these novice paths give you bonuses at level 1, level 2, level 5, and level 8. And the reason for that is basically every single level you get some sort of benefit. whether it's from your novice path, expert path, master path, or your ancestry at level 4. So yeah, you know, levels 1 and 2, not crazy complicated. In kind of old school D&D tradition, magicians, magic users are going to be a bit more, well, more versatile in the early levels. Maybe not more damage, because from what I've read, like, early melee guys can do quite a bit of damage relatively. So anyways, once you hit level 3, then you choose an expert path. And unlike Warhammer, you are not confined in any way in what expert path you choose. You can pick fucking anything. So, in the core rulebook, there are 16 different expert paths. And no matter what your novice path was, whatever stats you have, whatever, you can pick any of the expert paths. So I'm just going to list them, read them down. You have Cleric, Druid, Oracle, Paladin, Artificer, Sorcerer, Witch, Wizard, Assassin, Scout, Thief, Warlock, Berserker, Fighter, Ranger, Spellbinder. So, for example, say you started as a wizard, but you realize you like hitting stuff. Well, you might become then a Paladin. Or you might become a Spellbinder. Or you might become an assassin that uses some of your dark magic or shadow magic or something like that. Conversely, maybe you're a wizard, but you realize, hey, I'd like some of that cool magic that guy's using. So you might become a cleric, or you might become a berserker that uses some battle magic, or you know, you might. It's again, basically how it works is, depending on what expert path you choose, it might give you the chance to learn a new tradition or learn a new spell or something like that. And it might also increase your power score. And your power number is basically what level of magic you're allowed to use, as well as how many spells per day you can cast. And so what this means is, in simple terms, is anybody can fucking use magic. Anybody. If you want, you can learn magic and use it. Now, you might not be, in the end, raining down hellfire across the country, you know, or just ripping out people's hearts with your mind, or whatever, anything like this. You might just be, like, having, like, level 2 or 3 magic at the end, but you can supplement your warrior ability, your fighting abilities, or whatever, with certain magic traditions. And some of them are sort of designed in that way. Some of the magic is sort of meant to help out in combat. Specifically, I mean, I'll talk about this in the magic part, but the entire tradition of battle magic is really nice for when you're just in the midst of combat. Like, again, I don't want to start reading too many spells here, but the level 0 battle magic, augmented attack. As part of casting this spell, you make an attack with a weapon. You make this attack roll with 1 boon and can use intellect instead of the attack's normal attribute. But you don't have to use intellect. You can just use strength and get another boon out of it. And so even that, just you do nothing else but get that spell and like 1 power, and you can cast that a few times a day or a couple times a day, whatever, and boom, you get an extra boon for that attack roll. Or if you invest a little bit more, mighty attack. As part of casting the spell, you make an attack with a weapon. You make this attack roll with 1 boon. On a success, the target takes 2d6 extra damage. Boom. It's just better. It's like having an ability, but it's in the form of magic. And if you go really heavy into being like a battle wizard, a muscle wizard, you could get strike like lightning. You move like a blur, striking furiously as you go. Each creature you choose in the area must make an agility challenge roll with 1 bane. On a failure, it takes 4d6 plus 3 damage. Then move up to half your speed. Again, it's just sort of augmenting abilities. And there's shadow magic, which if you're like a thief and you want to be like kind of like a night blade, you can take some shadow magic to help you out to like magically snuff out lights, or you know, use chameleon and you know, all sorts of stuff like that. And so really you can go hog wild with different builds, because when you get to when you get to the master path at level 7, that's when things really open up, because there are 50, I believe. Do I really want to count this? I wish they would just say. I think I heard the number was 50. I'd believe it. There's 2 giant charts here. I think the number's around 50. 50 different master paths. And again, you can go into any of them. No matter what you were before, whether you were just pure warrior or you were a hybrid or whatever, you can pick any master path. Now, some of them are going to be more beneficial, more min-max than others, obviously. You know, if you just go pure wizard, you're going to be able to do just the most powerful pure wizardry stuff. If you're going to be pure combat, you're going to be the best at that, blah, blah, blah. But for a lot of people, min-max isn't as important as just making a really cool character. And there are some awesomely cool master paths here. You can be an apocalyptist. You can be a beastmaster, a chronomancer, a mage knight, a runesmith, transmuter. Is that like fucking Full Metal Alchemist or something? What the hell is that? I don't even know. I haven't even read all the master paths. Anyways, a death dealer, a dreadnought, an inquisitor, a gunslinger. You can be a fucking gunslinger. You can do magic, and then you're at master paths and like, holy shit, there's a gunslinger. Boom. Like, and no, that's not going to be probably as perfectly min-maxed as something else, but it's about making cool characters. It's about having a good time. And just, again, the breadth of character builds and options is staggering to me. And there's so much cool shit here. I could just read all these master paths for you. And, you know, a lot of the master paths don't add too much. They might add a couple abilities or things like that. A lot of the coolness of the system is in the magic. I think it's sort of somewhat intended that at some point along your career you at least dip into magic. You don't have to, but there's so many cool things in magic that would be like abilities in other games. There are some abilities just tied to paths, but a lot of it is in magic, whether it's, again, I'll go over this in the magic video, but there's shadow magic, battle magic, conjuration magic, there's alteration magic, there's curses, there's runes. You can put runes on your weapon, and it'll do more damage, or it'll like explode, or, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. You know, you could pick up some sawing magic. You could pick up some alteration magic to sort of make yourself into a badass. All sorts of stuff. I'll save that for the magic video. Yeah, I think I'm just going to do part 1 and part 2 here. Because otherwise I have other stuff that I want to talk about besides magic, so I don't want to just make a magic video, but that's going to be quite a bit of it. But this has already gone long enough, I guess. I'd rather have people watch both videos than peter out from one of them. Yeah, so I guess I'll just end it here. I'll talk about the magic and the setting and some other cool shit. And then I'll give sort of my final thoughts. So yeah, I'll leave it off here. So if you're interested, you want to hear about all the amazing, freaking really cool magic, go watch the next part as well. But my name is Mang. This has been Shadow of the Demon Lord, part 1. And I'll see you fine folks in the next part.